Good morning, everyone. We're sorry for the technical difficulties. We were a little late getting today Mañana started, but we're back in it now, and we got a good show today. Today, you're being hosted by Nickolas and Xavier Urpí.
Thank you.
I swapped out Alex, and the reason why is because our guests are Professor Michael Slon and Professor Benjamin Rous from the University Singers and the Charlottesville Symphony. I'm going to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Thank you to Emergent Financial Services, Castle Hill Cider, Matthias on Realty, Craddock Serious Insurance, and Ford Adelante.
Good morning, Nickolas. How you doing?
How you doing? I was getting to that. I was like, good morning. You got to grab your cafe con leche. I'm just trying to rush.
Wow, this is a great. I mean, listen, this is a great day to do that,
extra
right?
Hot
like 23 degrees, extra hot, no doubt. I mean, last week we said you got to have cafe con leche with maybe ice, right? Because it was 80 degrees, and today you got to have the cafe con leche nice and hot. Unbelievable. But it's a lovely day anyway, right?
Yeah, the sun's still shining. That's what matters. And we got it up and going, so we got the show. I was like, we're still in it to win it.
That happens.
Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate that. And for all those that are listening, don't forget to like and share. That's my line, right?
And subscribe.
Got it. Okay, that's all I'm supposed to say.
And
the whole time. I'm done.
Subscribe.
I can leave now. Subscribe. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
I was coming to that.
All righty.
You had one job.
Right. 3 words.
It's tough, though. It's 3 things I got to remember. I mean, it's not just 2 things.
So if you're ready, we'll jump right into it.
No, absolutely. We have 2 great guests, and I'm really very excited to chat with them and listen to what they have to say.
And the reason why is because they are doing a double concert on, as in they both will be conducting on November 11th and 12th.
That's right.
Would you like me to read out the
Sure.
So the performances will be Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5, the Emperor Concerto, Aaron Copland's Canticle of Freedom, Eric Whitaker's Equus. It was Jennifer Higdon's O Magnum Mysterium, and Hale Stork's I Will Lift Up My Eyes. So.
And that is this year?
That's
this year, this coming year, this fall?
This coming concert, like November 11th and 12th.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody knows when that is.
Yeah, so that's next week.
That's next week.
That's next
weekend.
Yeah, Friday night at 7:30 at Old Cabell Hall.
Saturday
night at 7:30 at Old Cabell Hall. Sunday afternoon, 3:30 at MLK Performing Arts Center.
Yes, indeed.
I had one job.
Yeah, you got it.
No, you got more than that.
You guys got a lot of questions coming.
Yeah.
Without you, these concerts I don't think would go over very well.
You could always have more rehearsal, but it is next week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to start off, though, would you introduce yourselves to the audience and tell us kind of how you got started in conducting?
Oh, how we got started in conducting? That's an interesting question. So I'm Ben Rous. I direct Charlottesville Symphony, and I'm trying to figure out how to not give the 13-minute answer to that question, because how you start in conducting is really murky. And even once you've started, it still feels like the beginnings are murky. My first opportunity to conduct music was a pit band that for a musical in college that needed a director to direct the pit band. So I did it. City of Angels, still one of my favorites. Still one of my favorite musicals.
That's a good jazzy score.
Yeah, nice kind of jazz big band type of ensemble. So that was my first conducting. But I've always been a classically trained violinist, violist, and composer, and so I definitely wanted to apply myself to orchestral conducting when the opportunities came. And there was later on a student-conducted orchestra that fortunately picked me to be their conductor through an audition. And so that was the first time that I really felt like the kind of conductor that I wanted to be and that I ended up being.
Wow.
Yeah, so Michael Slon, Director of Choral Music at UVA, and thanks again to both of you for having us on the show.
We appreciate you both taking the time to
great to be here. Ben's right. I mean, it always starts a little unusually because when you're a kid, right, almost no one in your neighborhood is offering conducting lessons, right? You're doing piano lessons or violin lessons or singing lessons. And so usually it's good if you start on an instrument or a voice or something like that. So I started as a pianist, as you guys probably know. And it was in high school. I had a very good director who was, wanted to enable the students to have some opportunities. And I was accompanying the choir and singing with them. And he had me conduct something, with the choir. I think junior year, and then senior year, I got to do something on a series of concerts, the same piece, a number of times, and I found it very exciting. But of course, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be in life at that moment. Went to college and continued to stay involved with chorus and then eventually orchestra. And it was right when I was graduating college, the choral groups, they offered me an opportunity to become assistant director of choral music at Cornell right as I graduated, which is unusual. And that's where I really started to feel like I think this is something I could do and that I find deeply engaging and meaningful as a vocation.
Well, I would say you feel like you could do it, but you haven't had the chance.
Exactly.
And getting that first chance is there's no standard path toward getting that first chance. That's why it's murky.
Yeah.
It is the thing that actually I was envisioning for myself even from a very young age, but there was no way to really engage that vision of the future because I just didn't see a way toward it. It was like this fortress with no doors. How do you
get in?
How do you storm that?
Yeah,
that's the view
something
before you
like
start.
that too. As a kid,
There's no way in.
We're both John Williams fans. I remember standing in my room as a kid, conducting along to the soundtracks, literally with a baton and everything. But if you're a violinist or pianist, all you need is yourself and a place to play, and you can work on your instrument. But if you're going to lead an ensemble, how do you get to practice your instrument in that case? That usually you have to be older and have certain kind of opportunities. So you're right. It's not always clear how you get to that initially until you go to school and get some opportunities.
So I would say, I'm curious, because obviously, when you play an instrument, right? First and foremost, you need to be able to read music, which is absolutely important for conducting, I suspect, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I have a funny story for you about in a minute, but yes, I agree with that.
So I guess my question though is, when you have a situation where you need to conduct, I suspect you are looking at every part of the orchestra when the violin comes in, when the trumpets come in, wherever comes in. Yeah. You need to be able to be reading simultaneous all those pieces, right? To be able to tell them, okay, you're coming in, okay, you're next, whatever. So I suspect that takes practice. Is like you said, it's not a matter of like I'm playing an instrument. Somebody says, "Can you now conduct this?" It's like, oh yeah, no problem. It's like it must be difficult. How does that come about?
So you put your finger on a really important thing, and I wish that everyone in the world at some point could see a full score to a piece like what we're doing.
I showed the students Equus to the point of this upcoming concert, and some of them were astounded to see all the things on the page.
Right, because what you see when the soprano or the tenor or the violist looks at their music is their part, and the score has all the parts at once. So instead of having many lines of music on a page, you got one, because they do this while they do this while they do this, and it looks beautiful on the page. It's beautiful, exactly. And also kind of $5.
We'll put the little bowl, collection bowl.
Clearing my throat into a microphone is a fine, worthy offense around here. I understand, but you see it happening all at once. So only one line fits, and it's a beautiful thing on the page. But it's also like, if you don't read music, it just looks like this design of scratchy. And for the person who reads just one line of music at a time, it does look intimidating. Yeah. So the answer to that is many-part answer. One is you do get used to it over many years, but it's also true that you really have to prepare ahead of time. Yeah. If you go into a rehearsal and try to sight read the score the way that a musician could sight read one line, you're not going to lead a very good rehearsal. It simply requires preparation so that you know already what's down there. Yeah. And what's down there becomes a visual reminder of what you already know rather than something that you're actively reading for the first time.
So before we get into Michael's story, how much time would you say before even like your first rehearsal are you guys going over the full scores and like making notes and doing things to prepare? Like, is there a lot of pre-prep work even before you walk in because there's things that you're worried about?
Not worried, just need to prepare.
Need to prepare for. Okay, better phrasing.
Yeah, I would guess there's an ideal factor of like 1 to 10 maybe of rehearsal time versus study time. Now, do we ever get that in our actual lives?
Real world.
I don't know. But it's also true that it's different when you're doing something for the first time versus having, for example, in my case, have you done the stuff on your half before? So So I've done the Emperor Concerto in the past.
Yeah.
So approaching that score for the second time, you're standing on the preparation of years before, and so then the factor becomes a little bit.
There's two ways to think about it. Yeah, that's a good point, Ben. One is you stand on your experience as a conductor. So when you're young and you're approaching scores like this, it takes even more work because you just haven't done it very much. Once you've done 100 plus orchestra concerts, probably in my case, or in your case, probably 1,000 plus, or then you have a much bigger toolbox with which to work, and so then when you're looking at the score, you have a better sense. Okay, what do I need to pay attention to? Who's going to need help here? How can we get the most juice out of the orange here? Those kind of things. But you're right. It's never. I remember talking about this at a workshop with the Atlanta Symphony and Chorus and all that. You never quite have enough time, the time in the real world, but it takes a fair amount of time ahead just to make sure you're prepared.
I hate to belabor this point, but I'm so interested because so you get a score, right? I mean, granted, so you guys at this point are as Nickolas put it before, geniuses, right, in what you do, right? So you get a score, and in most cases you've done it, so you have to go back on your history and the knowledge that you have. But especially at the very beginning, you get a score, and I'm trying to figure out, what is it that you do? Because, I mean, you're just looking at lines of different sections of the orchestra that are going to be playing at different times. So are you just preparing mentally as to when to be able to read? In other words, is it like reading a speech that's 50 pages long and saying, I can't read the speech, I got to say it, but I got to have an idea as to where everything is? Is that how it works, more or less?
Audiation would be a good word here, right?
Yeah, I think your analogy is a good one, which is that of an actor preparing a text. That is roughly what we're doing. There's the printed form. There's the performed sonic form, and we're trying to as it's contagious. You hit the microphone, so I hit the microphone. As Michael said, imagining in sound what's on the page,
in your mind. Audiating.
Yeah.
Okay. So create an image in your mind of how does it go.
Yeah.
And so that's a tricky skill to learn or to teach at a younger age because you can't quite see. For example, for our students, I try to teach them this. How do you see what's going on in their mind?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think what you do is, I'm sure, Ben, is something, so you sit down, there's a couple ways you can approach it. One is to just kind of get the big picture, like what's this narrative, what's the storyline of this piece, and that kind of thing. There's some very specific things, like who hasn't played in 55 measures and is going to need a cue on the end of 3 because they've been just looking at their part and counting, and they want a little reinforcement, like, hey, maybe it's now my time to come in. But also, and are there technical difficulties? Are there musical beauties to bring out? But in the end, you want to create a blueprint in your mind that you can then execute technically and with your people. Because if you don't have it clear up here, it's not going to be clear.
Right. So
you can't rehearse. See, what you're doing in rehearsal is comparing what you hear to what
you formulate in your head.
And what you formulate.
Okay, gotcha. So that's the key. The key is you guys look at notes and hear the music. I mean, I look at notes and I don't hear a thing, right? I mean, if I listen, I love it. But if I look at, I've never taken, not like Nickolas.
That's another way you can create the image, though. We could play through it or hear a recording.
So you guys look at it and hear the music, and so you're formulating in your head when you want, how something's supposed to hear. And then, like you said, then you go to practice, and it's like, all right, that didn't sound quite right, or that sounded better than in my head, or
I mean, anybody. We could make an analogy. Anybody can audiate in life, right? You just think, what do I want to envision?
Let's just put that.
No.
I
don't mean musically.
Not specifically for music.
Exactly.
The skill.
What do you want to do in your life? I envision this, then I make it happen. And even specifically, I'm sure if we said a popular folk song, you could probably hear it in your head. Just like if you say Washington, D.C., you can picture an image of things in Washington.
Right.
It's a little like that.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating skill.
Yeah. To work on and to, as you said, to teach it is even harder because you can't tell. It's hard to tell if somebody
until they get lost. They clearly have no idea.
Right.
Now the other, I have another question. You don't mind me asking these questions.
No.
Nickolas,
I know you had. I know you had questions too.
I know you had a list. What do I care about your questions? So, when do you find
I love the father-son dynamic, by the way.
So
you just wait.
When I go to the symphony and you guys are playing, and so I always wonder. Sometimes I look and you guys will kind of go like this, and then that part of the symphony will stop playing. But once in a while, I look at the people and the players, and I say, he wasn't even looking at you. So there are some that look at you, others that don't. Is it because they're so good at it, or are those the guys that you want to say, "Hey, wake up"? It's like you're supposed to look at me.
I'm going to let Ben.
I have my. I have my.
I do have an answer to this.
We both. We're not deflecting. We both have an answer that we think is so good that we don't want to force the other person to follow our answer. I think that's what's going on here. Am I right about that?
No, go ahead. You go for it. I'm sure yours will be great. Yeah, it'll be great. Go for it.
Okay, so this is a thing that people don't really think about that much. Yeah. And that I was actually not even taught in conducting school. I want to credit my source for the answer I'm about to give, who is David Robertson, who is now the director of orchestras at Juilliard and directs
used to be St. Louis
Sydney,
Symphony.
Australia, recently St. Louis, up until and I think still does the Sydney Symphony if I remember.
I know him a little bit. He's a very talented guy.
Extremely talented. Such a smart thinker about how conducting really works. And what he pointed out, which as soon as he said it, it crystallized in my mind. Yeah, I realized this a long time ago, but didn't quite have it crystallized in my mind, is that different players watch differently.
Yeah.
And that the default is read the music because they've got to read all their notes.
Right.
They're the ones making the music, so they're reading the notes, playing the notes correctly. And so your primary job as a conductor is to be clear enough that someone can follow you peripherally.
Yeah.
That they can use peripheral vision, and that you're not being so fancy and minute and intricate that they can't get the most important information from here up in their vision. Beyond that, different players look up differently. And if you've got, for example, a woodwind solo, this person might look at you, stare at you for 2 bars before and for the whole time that they're playing.
Yep.
And this player might look up just as they're breathing. Or this player might breathe and then follow you once they're playing. And when the player is looking more directly, then the window is much more wide open for you to share subtlety of information because they're looking directly. And so what you've got in front of an orchestra of players with different watching habits, different looking habits, peripheral, and different angles, and different distances, is that window of opportunity is opening and closing all around you at different times, constantly. And so you've got all these different windows opening and closing. And when you come to a new orchestra, the learning curve is learning how those windows work. When you're with an orchestra you work with all the time, you become accustomed to that, and it becomes instinctive. And that's something that's not taught in any master class or program that I've ever been in, is the way that people watch differently. So, number one, the overarching answer is the amount of information that you can share peripherally is the most important because, again, they have to read all the notes and play the right notes correctly, and we just get to stand there and wave a stick, which is comparatively easy compared with playing an instrument or singing. But also, when people do look up, they look up differently, and your job as a conductor is to leverage those open windows. Beat that.
I think that's... Well, I don't feel like this is a tennis match yet. I haven't pulled out my Djokovic to his Nadal yet. That's an excellent answer. Credit to Robertson, too, I guess. But no, it's a great answer, Ben. I agree with what he's saying. And I think you can see it in sections too, right? Like strings will tend to be sometimes more in the score. And he's right. I've known woodwind solos that, like a friend of mine who's an oboist, you look at him, he's looking at you ahead, he's looking at him during the solo. I mean, there's an incredible contact, which sometimes for the conductor even is reassuring. But that's not every player, and you want to help the player be comfortable, whatever their style is. I think you can encourage a section to look up more. I mean, sometimes you got people in the back of a string section that could look up or get their peripheral going a little more. But that's true. I think, let me just add a difference, which is choruses. I think choruses have less reason to be in the score, in a sense. They get usually more time with the music than an orchestra, and they've got all of it in front of them. And I think you've got to train your singers to look up for two reasons. One is, if you're going to sing, you've got to project your voice over it. You can't be singing into the floor or into the score.
That's a good point.
So you've got to, and you want to be like this. The score's here, and your eyes are out to the audience and to the conductor, because that's also expressive and communicative. So I think that's one thing. For a chorus, you want to really try to train them to be watching, especially at tempo transitions and so on. But the other thing is, occasionally with a chorus, we get to do something most orchestras don't, which is we perform from memory. Then there's absolutely zero reason they shouldn't be connected with, and then you can get really subtle, if you're able.
Wow. But from what you just described before, it seems to me that, and I would suspect that most players have memorized their part so well that my assumption, even though they have to read it, because if you mentioned the oboe guy is playing and looking at you, he's not reading, right? Because he's looking at you.
Might know the solo,
right?
Yeah,
but
that's a player with a pretty confident memory.
Yeah,
and that varies greatly between musicians.
Yeah, and if the strings have like 2 hours of music and they've had 3 rehearsals, you can bet they're going to need to be looking at the score.
Exactly. So it's so it varies.
It varies. Yeah.
All right, Nickolas, you can start with your questions.
I was like,
now.
he's got another one. Well, because one of the questions I want to ask was pertaining to the actual
let's talk
program.
About the concert.
Because
Right. Oh yeah, we have a concert.
That's what we're here for. That's right.
We're here for the concert. No, I mean it's great and have a lot of time. I just like to, obviously you guys can see, I like to make fun of my dad. But one of the things I thought was, in conducting the Beethoven particularly, right, to start with the Beethoven, then to move on to the other ones. But so I did a little pre-reading on the Beethoven. One of the things I did read that there's no cadenza for the pianist, and for those who don't know what a cadenza is, that's when the pianist kind of like goes off on his own and does his own little kind of showing off. And so the fact that Beethoven chose not to have one, does that it kind of shifts the focus almost from the pianist as a soloist to the conductor. How do you manage that as a conductor? Or at least that's what it would appear to me as a layperson.
Well, I would say this concerto rebalances a little bit toward the orchestra, not specifically toward the conductor. And I will say that I have 2 different reactions when someone says, I liked watching you conduct, which was great, they enjoyed the concert, but also it hurts me a little bit because the highest goal as a conductor is to disappear and make yourself obsolete.
And communicate the music,
where the audience just listens and watches the orchestra. And I have yet to achieve that. I feel like it's a failure every time that someone says that to me. So my first instinct is to deflect that too. But it's true that the role of the soloist is reimagined in this concerto, and it's not that there isn't a traditional cadenza, meaning that it comes kind of close to the end of the first movement and the orchestra is silent and the pianist goes up with a dominant 6/4 chord, and the pianist has a elaborate kind of improvisation on that harmonic progression all by itself. But unusually in this concerto, actually, the piano doesn't wait for a long orchestral introduction before it plays, but comes in right after that first chord with a flourish, which is itself kind of a miniature cadenza. Actually, there are 3 of them in a row, right? There's a chord, and the piano does this arpeggiation thing that then ends with a melodic turn. So those are kind of, I think the cadenza is sort of is sort of broken up and sprinkled earlier in the movement rather than being eliminated entirely. So it's reconfigured in a way that, typical of Beethoven, he was interested in tweaking, modifying, and even revolutionizing the classical forms. That's one of the reasons that people think of him as prefiguring the Romantic period, where then that formal mashing up goes to the nth degree.
Yeah.
By the way, just to clarify something, I do have a tendency sometimes to watch you, and I wouldn't take that negatively. It's just that the energy you bring and the excitement that you have up there, it's just amazing. So just because I'm watching doesn't mean I'm not enjoying the music, but sometimes I enjoy it even more because it's like I see you, and it's like sometimes I feel you're just going to jump out of the stage, and it's just like you just feel the music through you sometimes. So I've been to lots of booms. I've been to lots of symphonies, even in New York, with all and of course here I sit much closer, so I get to see the orchestra better. And I never really look at the. I just went there to listen because everything was so far away. But I enjoy it more now because I get to see the players, but I also get to see you. And like I said, there's a relationship there that I never used to see that I truly enjoy. So I wouldn't take that negatively.
That's helpful to hear, actually.
I will actually add to that and just say, like, as somebody who just loves classical music, as we do, sometimes all the energy from the orchestra is inside you, but your guys are moving around. We're shoulder
I feel like audiences
like
should
this.
move around more too.
Well, and you want to, right? You want to, like, but at the same time, like, what do you do? It's not a dance, so like, there's nothing to do other than just. So sometimes having the conductor be a little bit more expressive helps because you can channel the audience, and like it's almost like all our tension is being released when a conductor is moving around.
Interesting.
I agree. I do agree with that. I think there is a chance for the conductor to be a bridge from the music and the ensemble to the audience. And Ben, it's funny. I had a mentor who also said there's another way the conductor kind of helps the audience, and it's okay if they do watch them. And it's because you're directing your attention towards certain things visually, but that then causes the audience to direct their attention orally toward certain things, like, oh, maybe that line is important.
That's a good point.
So I think there's a couple positives to that. And I personally, when I sit in the audience too, I usually can't sit still. I like to bounce around.
It's hard, especially when you guys have conducted so well. And I don't know if you knew, we were there for the Schubert, and I wrote a review for the Schubert because the way you conducted it was like perfect for what Alex and I particularly, because there are only two pieces that we're picky about, which is Schubert's Eighth and Mahler's Fifth. Those are the only two that we are picky about how they're conducted. Alex and I are not picky at all.
Well, I thought you were going to say picky about the symphony itself. I said, picky about that?
No, I'm not picky about the composers. But those are the only two, and specifically only like the first movement of the Schubert. And you just did it perfectly, exactly how we love, where you repeated the exposition, like you went all like, it was like all in on everything that you wanted to hear from that piece. And so sometimes it's like, especially then, it's even worse because Schubert's nervous tension is just like making you like, trembling in your chair. So to have some release from that, more than just musically, it's something that as an audience member, we really like crave almost it's
nice.
Yeah, if we just had somebody that just sat there and just went with their finger, like it would be very difficult to like
Fritz Reiner.
Yeah, like Reiner. Yeah.
All right.
Interesting.
And moving on to the second half, so I know we're gonna
four pieces. Yeah.
There's four pieces, and one of the things I found very interesting about the way you guys chose the program, and I don't know if you got together in deciding how the program was, but there's 4 American composers in Beethoven.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was that intentional, or was there?
Well, so
Michael will answer most of this because the second half of this program is really his brainchild. The process is he dreamed up this brilliant idea, put it to me, and I said that's brilliant, and
thank goodness, right?
and I tried to figure out what I thought would work okay with it, because as you said, the two halves of this, there's like one token dead white European composer, and that's the first half of the program, Beethoven. And what I love about it is that then there's 4
3 of them living,
4 Americans, 3 living, and different styles of music, but it works together. And when he put it to me, I just thought, I just thought it was awesome, and that's how we came up with it. And Michael can obviously.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's good. As you can tell with Ben, I mean, I enjoy collaborating with Ben. Now that you've been on faculty for a bit now, we've had a chance to do some wonderful projects, and that was true with his predecessor, Kate Tamarkin, too. We did a lot of different things together. And I enjoy that I have the chance to come in usually every other year for one of these subscription concerts with the Symphony and bring the university singers, and we do some big works. And there's always a conversation, like, what are we going to do? How's the program going to work? And I appreciate Ben's openness to pairing up this kind of what I envision the second half is as I told him and others, kind of like an American choral symphony.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So there's 4 pieces, and I structure them a little bit like you would the movements of a symphony. So the Copland opens it. We're doing Copland Canticle Freedom for your audience out there, and that's kind of like an opening allegro or a kind of a flourish and that kind of thing. Then we do Eric Whitacre's Equus, which is just, if you haven't heard it out there, please go take a listen. Please come hear us next week. It's just this driving, wild ride, right? Equus obviously means horse, and it's just like a very wild horse ride. And it's a hard piece for everybody, but it's fascinating. It's a little bit like a scherzo, right? Fast and energetic. The Jennifer Higdon O Magnum Mysterium is beautiful, beautiful. It is a slow setting of that Latin text with a much smaller set of instruments, and that would be like the slow movement of the symphony. And then the Hailstork is like a cantata unto itself. Right. I will lift up mine eyes in several movements, but that kind of serves as a bigger finale to bookend the 4 movements. And that was my idea, and I thought it helped diversify our programming. And I'm. Gratefully, I know 2 of the 3 that are living. I know Whitacre personally. I know Hailstork pretty well, actually, because he's right down the road in Virginia. We've actually commissioned him before with the Oratorio Society. And it's great to be able to present their music and know something about them. I haven't met Higdon personally yet, but she's, of course, very active right now as well. And then Copland is, there's a beautiful American sound. I mean, that piece is shorter, not done very much, but you will hear immediately what we think of as the Copland sound.
You'd be surprised that you haven't heard it, because you think this is like quintessential Copland.
Unmistakable Copland. So that's a little summary of how my thinking about that half of the program.
The Equus seems extremely. It's my turn. Because I've heard the Equus when you sent it to me, and it seems very, very, very intense, timing wise. And just
why does it have to be his turn?
I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Just because he's prepared? What's going on here?
We had this conversation about, like, do you want to host or you want me to host? He said, no, you host. So I got my turn.
That's because I get a chance to just ask questions whenever I want. Usually that's how it works.
We just answer the questions. But yeah,
so like diving into that piece, it almost it breaks up the program very interestingly. Like, could you talk about that a little bit? Like, what would you expect and somebody coming to the audience to hear it for the first time?
Yeah,
like,
how
would they prepare?
I think what's interesting, right, you're getting to hear 4 pieces you probably haven't heard, which I think is exciting, along with a piece that you may well know and love and should hear a lot, the Emperor Concerto, incredible piece. And I think, but let's make a Beethoven analogy, Ninth Symphony. Second movement, very, third moment, they're very different.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have 2, and that's the same composer in the same piece. Yeah. So I think it's fine that you have this kind of contrast. Now, and I think the audience is going to feel like they just went on 4 different rides, 4 different journeys as they experience these pieces. The Equus could easily finish a concert. It has that kind of feel to it, but I think the Hailstork will be a beautiful ending, and I think the rhythms are rather. There's some funky grooves in the Whitacre, and it's very catchy. It's also hard to do. But I think it hopefully will get the audience bouncing in their seats a little bit. Like, wow, listen to that groove, and it has a certain kind of primal energy to this piece. When the chorus has no text in the piece, it's just neutral syllables.
Oh, interesting.
Right, no words, just neutral syllables, and so the way Whitaker wrote it, and I think hopefully they'll just be kind of caught up in the energy of that for 7 minutes or whatever it is.
My question was really, how did you come up with that? I mean, is that something that you've had in your head for a long time and wanted to come out, or someday?
The Equus or the
the whole put them together? Because I always find it interesting how you come up with what you're going to be playing the next year. I mean, we kind of sit in our seats. The program's like, okay, what's it going to be? And sometimes I sit
Alex
there and
announces it in the office,
Yeah.
like Symphony's programming.
Yeah.
So we all write
and once in a while, it's like, just go. Someone said, "What is this? Why did they put that for?" I mean, right? So
Really?
really. I mean,
no, you gotta go.
I don't know, only because I've never heard some, right? So it's like,
but that's good.
Listen,
good.
I'm 67 years old. I'm an antique, right? At this
young.
point. And so, like I tell him, he's always like, "Oh, you got to listen to this new piece." I said, "You know what? Probably, but I've only got a certain number of years to go, and I love these symphonies that I love, and I want to hear them again. So I'm not sure I want to."
You know what it's
introduce.
like, Xavier? Right, you have your favorite restaurant, right?
Exactly.
Right, and you go there because you love the food there. But what if, Nick says, "Oh, Dad, there's this other restaurant, you got to try it." And then you go and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't imagine my life now without knowing this restaurant."
I recognize there's that option, but there's always the option is like, this stunk.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could have had good food.
Look, you're not required to like every piece when you come to a concert.
Yeah.
So but I think it's our duty as artists to present a variety of works, and Ben also is very keen on this. He programs for the 21st century, and I think that's important that we present some of the best repertoire from history, because if you forget that, then it's just like you have amnesia or short-term memory. But at the same time, there are real beautiful living people making beautiful, extraordinary things, and I think we also have an obligation to present that, and not just for the audience. We work at an educational institution, so it's also part of the students' educational experience, and that diversity. Hal Stork's an African American composer, and then one of my African American students in University Singers comes up and is like, "Wow, I really resonate with this piece." That's important too. That's special.
Yeah.
So, but how did I think of it? I've known the pieces for different reasons. The Canticle, I sang that once at Cincinnati May Festival. I saw Whitaker conduct Equus, so that kind of factored in. The Hayden I kept hearing on the radio, and I was like, gosh, I want to do this piece at some point. And the Hailstork, I knew Hailstork, but I didn't know the piece. I just went looking around. And then you try to assemble something that makes sense. Ben will, I think, agree with me. Programming is actually one of the hardest parts of being a conductor. Yeah. To come up with compelling.
Yeah, and so in this case, you've got a bunch of pieces which are a little shorter in length, and you realize, I would assume you realize these sort of suggest a unit. They're like they're pretty disparate. They're going to sound different from each other, especially I think when you get to the beginning of Equus. There's a sort of we're in a new sound world from
Copland.
Copland and Beethoven.
Yeah,
I think Equus will probably make Copland sound kind of like Beethoven in comparison with what's coming.
That's interesting.
And so I think that moment in the program kind of flips a little bit of a switch. And I have two reactions to butt into to this part of the conversation, to what you said about. I remember I had amazing good fortune in high school that I was in Helsinki on two different trips. This is very randomly. My parents took me, and then my youth orchestra was on a tour in Scandinavian countries. And so it was my second time in Helsinki. I was like the cool guy who had been to Helsinki before, right? And now, of course, I've never been since, and there's no other city that is that rarefied in the world that I've ever been to twice since then. But I knew about this restaurant, and there were a zillion other restaurants, but I wanted to go to the one that I knew. Yeah. So I can understand what you're saying about that. There's a comfort factor to that, right? And I can understand that. And for me, that probably applies in other areas of my life, although not in music. I don't listen to pieces that I already know, generally speaking, like at all.
Yeah.
I listen to pieces that I don't know, but it's a little different as a musician than as just someone who's a consumer of music but not a musician themselves. So I understand that difference. So there's that is something I can relate to. So there's one aspect of like, should I approach this new piece, which is it's unfamiliar to me. Then there's another aspect which might also be in play, which is I think that it might have a different harmonic language from one that I'm accustomed to in music of the 19th century. And that's in a very different category. And to me, that's very much about, because people there's no camera pointed in that direction, but is it okay for me to like mention what I'm seeing over there? There's this
everyone knows that
everybody knows
the I Love CVille Network. Yeah.
There's a fantastic liquor array over there, and I remember very distinctly, because we were talking before the show, but if I am gonna have something to drink, it probably would be scotch.
Oh yeah.
And I remember very clearly the moment where I had never had scotch before, and the first time that you have a scotch, you think, how can windshield washer fluid. How could anybody willingly put this in their mouth? But
then you have Lagavulin.
If you first of all, there are entry ones which are more smooth, but if you then realize, no, I can handle this taste, and then you're offered something which is peated versus a Highland versus something which is very floral from the Japanese single malt area, which Japanese single malts are an entire different world especially from a peated scotch. Then you realize that behind that barrier is a universe that was closed to you before you came through the barrier. So a piece of new music is a little bit like a scotch. And I at the first glass I had, I was shocked, and now I enjoy many glasses of scotch. So I would say, have a scotch.
Yeah, and
I love it. Have a scotch.
That's an excellent analogy, and it's an excellent analogy. And just to bring our conversation full circle in some ways, remember at the beginning, Ben, you talked about a fortress into which there was no entrance.
Yeah.
This is another way of putting it. That it's not just us that want to get in the fortress; we want to open it to other people. Yeah. I mean, that's a strange analogy because in some ways it's not a fortress at all. It's available to everyone.
No, and I appreciate that. And don't get me wrong. I find it. I guess my question was more like, how do you, it must take a lot of time to come up with a program to all of a sudden say there's this piece, and because you always have wonderful pieces, right, where everybody can enjoy, and then you have an introduction piece sometimes. So there's a piece that maybe a lot of people say never heard of it, right? Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy them in the sense that when I'm there, first of all, I have no choice but to listen to it, right? But then once in a while, it's like, wow, that was really good, right? And then once in a while, it's like, yeah, it's not my cup of tea, but that's fine, right? I still appreciate the fact that somebody wrote that, right? But how do you come up with that, list of, I'm going to put this together, is interesting to me in the sense of, do you think of a genre? Do you think of I don't know what you're thinking of when you put it together.
I hear what you're getting at.
You try to think of everything. Yeah. There's so many different angles on it at once, and they sometimes conflict with each other. That's what makes programming hard.
I'm curious to hear, but I'm going to bet you did. I think when you're young, you make a dream list, right? You're like, I want to conduct this, because you've learned all these cool pieces. And I think Ben and I have at least been in the field long enough now where we're fortunate enough we've covered a fair amount of the dream list, or at least some of it. And there are pieces, like I have conducted B minor Mass by Bach. What amazing. Verdi Requiem. You could go on and talk about a Bernstein Mass.
Carmina Burana?
I have conducted that. I know you want to do,
When is that coming?
And
I was going to forbid him from saying
that. Yeah, that's all right.
Bring it up again.
And so what you do is part of the reason you want to do those is not just for yourself, it's because you believe in them as artistic works. You want to share them with other people, your students, your singers, your players, your audiences, the public, as we're doing here. But at the same time, then you've got to start thinking creatively in other directions too. So I think it's a combination of those things.
Yeah. There was a philosopher, and I don't know who it was, because my friend quoted it to me, and I forgot what he said. But it was a philosopher who said, we are different people at different points in our life, which I thought was kind of a fascinating way to say people change over time.
Personality-wise, that's probably true.
We're different people. And so, when I started playing violin, I wanted to perform for people because I wanted to show off this new thing I could do. And then, later on, I craved the sort of meditative state that music put me in, and I craved the opportunity to share that mental state. And now I'm in a place which is similar to that. That's very operative in my thinking about it. But it's gotten more kind of broad in the sense of what do I want art to be doing in the world, and that is really what's kind of in the background of programming decisions now. Is what do I think this can accomplish? What do I think a large arts organization can do in a small city or in a region or just kind of in general? What are we really doing here? Is sort of the question in the background right now.
That's fair. No, it's good.
I have one last question for Professor Rous, and this is the question that we're following up from before. Ben. I'm sorry. If you could conduct a Mahler symphony, which would it be? Because I know Michael's answer because we talked about it at lunch, but
it's a tricky one.
And Das Lied von der Erde is an acceptable answer.
It is?
Yeah, we'll take
Don't
it.
pick that.
Because you want it for yourself.
No, I don't. I don't.
I love that one.
I don't know. 9.
9.
9.
Okay, nice.
I can get that.
And it's not because I think it's necessarily the easiest to understand of the maybe it's because it's the hardest to understand of the. Actually, I don't think it's the hardest to understand. I think others are more.
8 is first.
Well, yeah.
That's not my pick.
I am evidently speaking to a Mahler enthusiast here, so I've got to watch what I say.
No, you don't have to watch what you say at all.
Symphony 8 is an inert mess. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's not that it doesn't sound good, and it sounds amazing, but it's just
it
kind of goes on sounding amazing, and I would say 9, but also 2.
Yeah.
Comes to mind right after that.
Did I say 4 or 2?
You said
right
4.
After that.
Which I've already conducted, but I just adore it. But 2 is
fantastic.
I would love to do 2.
I would love to hear either
Alpha
any of the 9.
Stein.
So
We're
open for 2, 8, 4.
We're just a bunch of dudes naming numbers right now.
Yeah,
we're just sitting around spitting out numbers to most of these. I'm sorry, folks. If you're listening to this and you think Mahler's Mahler, start with 1. Start with Mahler.
It's a great
Symphony
piece.
1. It is great.
Yeah.
1 is right up there.
And then
but I would say
going.
2 above that, and 9 and 2. 9 and 2. Yeah.
all right.
Not 4? Wait a minute.
Well, 4 and 5, beautiful.
I love 4.
Yeah.
I
4 and 5,
have gotten the chance to do Symphony 4. I've never conducted 5.
Yeah.
I see. I would never start with 1 because I always tell people to do 7 because if they don't like Mahler, they'll never get there, and that's my favorite. So I'm like, just listen to 7 first. And if you don't, just start with my favorite. If you don't like it, then just walk away.
I think he's right. Entry scotch. You need an entry.
Yay! Start with 1.
So should we remind everybody when these whatever's coming up?
The concert that's coming up is November 11th and 12th. You can get tickets at the UVA Arts box office. Please do. And they're going to be at Old Cabell Hall at 7:30 on Saturday, and at the Monticello High School, correct?
Charlottesville, MLK Performing Arts.
The MLK Performing Arts Center
Charlottesville
at 3
High School.
p.m.
Yep.
on
3:30,
Sunday, 3:30.
So yeah,
Did you write this down?
Yeah, no, I didn't write it down.
No wonder.
Yeah.
And can we just throw in also that
so far.
the 2 ensembles, the Charlottesville Symphony and University Singers, will also be collaborating in December on the traditional family holiday concerts.
Oh, yes.
And when is that? When is that?
December 2 and 3.
Okay, yeah.
Both at Old Cabell. And there's other choral concerts between now and then, too, so just check the website.
Yeah, no, we will make sure to share them as they come up.
Absolutely.
Since we ran out of time. And half of my questions were not answered. Thank you.
Wow.
Well, we started like 5 minutes late. You got like 2 minutes to go, and then you got one more question that they can answer in 2 minutes? I mean, your questions. I mean, I looked at your questions and I said, who wants to really like...
There's no way. I don't think we could go 2 minutes with any of these questions.
We're fine.
Thank you guys both for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a
Thank
lot
you
of
guys
fun.
for having us on.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate the patience with with my questions, but I just
they're good ones.
once you start talking about what you do, I always get intrigued.
Yeah.
I think they're very
Fascinated,
good
yes.
questions.
Thank you.
That's why, if you don't mind, we'll have you guys back so that I can get through my questions.
I appreciate you
I guess I won't be
steamrolling
here
his
next
preparation.
time. I guess I won't be here.
First time in the show history, I prepped for a show and I didn't get to use any of it.
Well, that's all right. It's
First and last time.
First and last time, I'm like. Thank you to Emergent Financial Services, to Craddock Serious Insurance, Matthias John Realty, and Castle Cider for sponsoring our show today. Thank you, Xavier, for joining us. Thank you, professors, for being with us today. And until next time, hasta mañana.
Yeah.
Bravo, boys. Well done.
Brilliant.
Wrapping it up is always the hardest thing to do. Alex knows how to do it.